In regard to self-defense, many supposedly prominent Jewish politicians and civic leaders have chosen to oppose God's law in favor of man's law.
I think the first thing that we have to do is recognize where this gun control is coming from. We need to recognize the laws that are a problem, and we need to identify the people that are behind them.
California Senator Dianne Feinstein opposes God's law. In a 60-minute interview on the topic of gun control, she said this: "If I could have gotten 51 votes in the Senate of the United States for an outright ban, picking up every one of them, Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in, I would have done it." Her statement contradicts her own actions, as she once had a concealed weapons permit to carry a handgun in California. New Jersey Senator Frank Lautenberg opposes God's law. He and Senator Feinstein voted in favor of firearms confiscation during national disasters, such as Hurricane Katrina, a time when self-defense is most needed from criminals and roving gangs of looters. In 2007, Senator Lautenberg voted against the Vitter Amendment, a bill that protects U.S. citizens from gun registration laws imposed by international groups or agencies, including the United Nations. Rabbi Eric Yoffe of the Union for Reform Judaism opposes God's law. At a Million Mom March rally, he stated, "Controlling guns is not only a political matter, it is a solemn religious obligation." But he provides no Jewish sources to back up his assertion. Child Holocaust survivor and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League, Abraham Foxman, opposes God's law. Given the evidence of his own disarmed people suffering at the hands of the Nazis, his support for gun control contradicts the Torah tradition he claims to honor. The ADL, which monitors and tracks anti-Semitic activity around the world, favors a disarmed populace. The ADL fought in support of Washington, D.C.'s ban on the possession of firearms in the landmark 2008 Supreme Court decision, District of Columbia versus Heller, and the 2010 follow-up ruling in McDonald versus the City of Chicago. In those cases, the court upheld that the Second Amendment guarantees the individual right to keep and bear arms, and that right extends fully to state and local laws. The ADL argued against it. Contrary to Torah law, the ADL contends that states should retain the right to keep guns out of the hands of its citizens. Amazingly, the ADL supports a U.S. gun control law that was rooted in Nazi law, the Gun Control Act of 1968. This federal law was authored by Senator Thomas Dodd of Connecticut and signed by President Johnson. Like the 1938 Nazi Weapons Act, the U.S. Gun Control Act of 1968 dictated who could and who could not own a firearm, and put restrictions on the types of guns Americans can own. Prior to writing the bill, on July 2, 1968, Senator Dodd requested a translation of the 1938 Nazi weapons law from the Library of Congress. A comparison of the language in the final bill shows some of it was copied, word for word, from the same laws the Nazis used in 1938. The same laws that put Europeans on a list 30 years earlier were now being used to put Americans on a list. The same laws that were approved by Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. The staunch anti-gun senator from New York, Charles Schumer, also opposes God's law. He has sponsored many bills to ban military-appearing weapons and to impose a waiting period on handgun sales. Although Mr. Schumer is opposed to his constituents owning firearms, he himself enjoys pheasant hunting with his colleague in the House, Ben Nelson of Nebraska. California Congressman Henry Waxman opposes God's law. He absurdly made this statement in 2008. If someone is so fearful that they are going to start using their weapons to protect their rights, it makes me very nervous that these people have weapons at all. In contrast to Mr. Waxman's statement, the great liberal Jewish Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis wrote, "We shall have lost something vital and beyond price on the day when the state denies us the right to resort to force." It is evident. The rights and liberties afforded to Americans through the Constitution are under attack by reckless politicians and misguided leaders. Why would Mr. Waxman be nervous about people protecting their rights, unless he was trying to take away those rights? Is he embracing God's laws or man's laws?
Let me give you an example of how absurd some of man's laws are. I live in New Jersey, so here is my New Jersey firearms identification card. My New Jersey firearms identification card I have to show anytime I want to even hold a gun in a store or buy any ammunition. Now, this has my name on it, my address, all sorts of interesting things, and my fingerprint. I don't get fingerprinted when I go to buy something, and no one exactly checks this for identification before selling me ammunition. What's the purpose of this? The purpose of this is to have my name on a list so that the state police know that I'm a gun owner. There's no other reason to do this. Why do they need to have such a list? This is the kind of gun control, this is the kind of man's law that begins to cause the trouble that we're talking about.
What seems impossible replays itself over and over again. Those who cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Never again means vigilance. Is our generation keeping watch? Americans have to decide. They can repeat the past or work to eliminate those laws that destroy our rights.
Well, we have a principle in Jewish law. The principle is dina de malchuta dina, which essentially means that you follow the law of the land. Now, following the law of the land has its limits. You don't follow the law of the land if it forces you to violate Torah law. So when you start talking about things like gun control here in the States, Torah law does not say go out and break the law. What it says is that's an unjust law. Go out and do everything you can to change it.